Hello everyone, it's Meg and today I'm going to be doing another recent reads video. I swear I only filmed one of these like last month or something like that. Yes, it was last month in fact. Yet I'm filming one now in November is when I'm filming this. This video will either be up end of November, beginning of December. But yeah, kind of crazy, not gonna lie. I have obviously read quite a few books to talk to you guys about. So that is what I'm going to do today. I've got a variety of books. I've got some poetry, I've got some adult, I've got some YA, contemporary, I've even got my first mystery book, which is rather exciting. So yeah, I'm looking forward to talking to you guys about these. So without further ado, let's get into the video. The first book that I have on this list is The Sky is Everywhere by Jandy Nelson. This is a book that I've been wanting to read for a while. I have read Jandy Nelson's other book, which is I'll Give You the Sun, and I wasn't a massive fan of that, but I felt like this book appealed to me more because the main character writes poems. This book is basically about a girl named Lenny who has recently lost her sister, and it is about her going through her process of grief, and there is also a love triangle. It is like a very romance heavy book, which I didn't realise it was going to be quite so heavy on that when I went into it. I read this book for the Gilmore Girl Readathon, and all the other books that I read for that are in my last recent reads video, so I leave the link for that in the description if you want to go and check out all the other books that I read for it. But this book was a roller coaster for me. There were times where I was really enjoying it, and then I kind of ducked down to DNF it, and then I really enjoyed it again, then I wasn't a fan. It was just like all over the place. What I did like about this book and what kept me going was mainly the factor that basically each chapter Lenny has a poem that she writes that is about her sister and how it is a way for her to deal with her grief, which I really enjoyed the factor of how she channeled her grief through that way, being able to write about her sister. But I was kind of a bit funny on the romance factor, like, because there's a love triangle in this, and I don't know how much I love love triangles, if that makes any sense. There were some bits that I absolutely adored, like one of the love interests I definitely preferred more than the other one, and I don't know how I felt about the idea of there being such a romance heavy plot when the main character is dealing with grief. I don't know why. I feel like it can be done right. I'm not sure how I feel about it in this book. I've not really read many books where those kind of two topics are so heavily based in the same plot. But yeah, I don't really know how to describe it. It was just an absolute roller coaster. I did really enjoy some bits more than others. Like I said, the poems were the bit that kept me going because I really wanted to just read through all of them, and obviously it would make a bit more sense if I read the entire book. So I gave this book a 3 out of 5 stars, I'd say, and I really did enjoy it. And also I read this physically, and I read Jandy's other book through audiobook, and I wasn't a fan of the audiobook, but being able to read it physically made me appreciate her writing and how beautiful her writing is, because she has some sort of qualification or degree or something along those lines in poetry, which I never actually knew that, because this book was meant to be originally written in verse, as that this is her debut novel, and also she has apparently writes poetry. I never knew Jandy wrote poetry until I read the bit in the back, which I found really interesting. But I feel like she did do really well with this book in the factor of including poems and also doing it in prose as well. I really enjoyed kind of the mixture of it. I feel like it would have been a beautiful book just in verse, but I feel like maybe I prefer it more like this, but I don't know. But I really enjoyed her writing. I could appreciate it a lot more when physically reading it, especially since I really didn't like the audiobook of her last novel at all. So really, I still enjoyed some aspects of it, even though it was like roller coaster. So like I said, gave it a 3 out of 5 stars, solid read. I feel like I did prefer it a little bit more than I'll Give You the Sun. But yeah, really happy that I finally got to read it. Next up, I have a poetry collection, which is Poems to Live Your Life By, which is chosen and illustrated by Chris Riddell. Back in September, I went to a poetry evening, which was by Chris Riddell, who is a very well-known children's illustrator and author. He illustrated the Otterline books, if you've ever heard of them, and he also illustrated Coraline, which I feel like a lot more people know, and many other books, and him and another poet did this evening, and it was such a joy. He was such a wonderful person, and I bought 2 of his books, and this is the first one. I do have the other one which I'm currently reading, so he has also been asked to do a 3rd poetry collection, which is very exciting. And this is the first one, and this is a poetry collection that I had signed, which was lovely, and it has basically different little bits of, how do you say, there's different categories in it, like musings, youth, family, war, endings, all that sort of thing. And he has illustrated all of these poems as well, which I think is absolutely wonderful. So I don't know how well you can see, but he has some illustrations throughout these poems, and I love his illustrations, and I feel like it actually made me engage more in this book. I read this quite quickly because even though I love poetry, I don't read it very fast. That's another illustration. I think that's for the Jabberwocky. His illustrations are wonderful, and I feel like it made the read a lot more engaging, and also just brought another aspect to it, a new light to it, which I absolutely adored. And look how beautiful they are. He seems to capture the poems perfectly. The ones that are a little bit darker, definitely with the images, make it a little bit more haunting. And I just absolutely adore it so much. I think he even has a poem that he wrote in here and one in the other book that I'm reading of his. So yes, I really enjoyed this, and it's such a fresh way to do a poetry collection. Obviously there seems to be more poetry collections these days that do include illustrations, but there's just something about Chris's illustrations that are even more marvellous, and I absolutely adore it. So I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. I found some wonderful new poems, and I'm looking forward to finishing his 2nd book that I have, and then also reading the 3rd one once it comes out, hopefully at some point next year. Next up, we have a book that has been on my TBR for ages, and I finally finished it, and that is Death Comes to Pemberley by P.D. James. I finally finished it, and I actually quite enjoyed it. This is a mystery novel, and I am not interested in mysteries. They are generally not my sort of thing, and I'm just not, because I'm an absolute chicken. But I actually enjoyed this more than I was expecting to. This is a Pride and Prejudice retelling, which is like post Pride and Prejudice, about 5 years after Lizzie and Darcy have been married, and it has a murder that takes place. And I didn't know what to expect going in, so I don't really have much to compare this book to, but I really enjoyed it. I feel like it did still stay true to the characters and like the storyline and the writing of Jane Austen and the original Pride and Prejudice, but it was still quite eerie, a little bit creepy. Like, I wouldn't go for much more creepiness than this. It's not even that creepy, to be fair, but like kind of the mystery aspect, like the eerie aspect, was probably just the right amount for me, and it was still quite well done. I did enjoy the storyline. It did not end up how I thought it was going to. Like, what happened in the end, I wasn't quite planning on it. But I did really enjoy it, and I listened to the audiobook, and I did quite enjoy the audiobook, so I would recommend it. It's nothing special, I just personally quite like the narrator. One thing I wasn't a massive fan of though, I don't know whether it's because I was listening to the audiobook or not, but Colonel Fitzwilliam is such a wonderful character when you read the original Pride and Prejudice story or when you watch the original film, but for some reason I wasn't a massive fan of him in this book. He just seemed a little bit more, I don't know if arrogant's the right word, but he just seemed a bit more up himself, and I couldn't feel his kindness and his warmth that comes through in the original Pride and Prejudice compared to this, which I don't quite know why. I guess the plot is slightly different, but I just didn't have that love and get that wonderful vibe off him that I usually do from the original story. But apart from that, I did really enjoy it, and I don't know how many more mysteries I'm going to read in the future, but this has maybe intrigued me to possibly start delving into that just a little bit more. So overall, I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. Next up, I read True Love at the Lonely Hearts Bookshop by Annie Darling. I got this book from a little book corner that is in one of the shopping centres near where I live, and I just paid a donation for it because it looked really interesting, and this was actually a really wonderful surprise. I'll read you the first bit of the blurb on the back so you can kind of get a gist for it. I will tell you a bit more about it in a minute, but the first part of this says, "It's a truth universally acknowledged that a single woman in possession of a good job, 4 bossy sisters and a needy cat must also have want of her one true love." Isn't it? Like, does that not like grab you in? Like, oh my god. As soon as I read that, I knew I had to read it. So this book basically follows a girl named Verity who has 4 bossy sisters. She works in a bookshop with her friends. She's very much an introvert, and she lives above the bookshop with her cat and one of her work colleagues. And for the past little bit, she has been faking a boyfriend. She's been making a boyfriend up to get excuses for people not matching her up. And he is called Thomas Hardy. He is an oceanographer. Nobody has ever met him because he's always travelling the world, even though he is not real, but he sounds very wonderful regardless. And then one day, Verity is in a restaurant and she has to mistake someone's identity, and basically she meets this guy called Johnny who they have a little mix-up, and they end up fake dating to get out of people setting them up. And that's all you need to going into the story. She's also a massive Jane Austen fan, as each chapter starts with a Jane Austen quote, or nearly every chapter. And this was just such a cute, fun, fluffy read, and I really, really enjoyed it. I felt like I could relate to Verity a lot because she is somebody who is very much an introvert. She gets incredibly drained from being around people. She maybe gets drained a lot even more than I do, as her introvertism, if that is even a word, does definitely play a big part in this book. And Johnny is also a really lovely character. There is like maybe 1 or 2 frustrations that I have with him, especially with his situation. Like, if you read this book, you will know what I'm talking about, because it's just really freaking annoying. But I do love the romance in this book. I think it is absolutely wonderful. I love the setting of this little bookshop called Happily Ever After, I believe, which sounds wonderful, and living above a bookshop with your friends and your cat. Like, that is just the epitome of a book lover's heaven. I loved all of the characters in this. I thought they were so engaging and funny. This book is very funny in general. It's got that British humour, which obviously I love. And it was just so enjoyable. I did really enjoy it. I highly recommend that you pick it up. And Annie has another book which I feel like is a companion novel to this, which follows a different character that you should probably read before this book, I think. But I absolutely adored this book with all of my heart. I will definitely be picking this up again when I'm in the mood for a little bit of a brighter read to brighten my mood. And it is another wonderful adult contemporary romance to add to my collection. So overall, I gave this a 4.75 out of 5 stars, I believed. Really enjoy it. Highly recommend that you go and pick it up. Next up, I have Holding Up the Universe by Jennifer Niven. This is a book that I have been meaning to read for ages again, and then I finally found it in a charity shop a few months ago, and I picked it up fairly recently, and I did quite enjoy it. Jennifer Niven is the author of All the Bright Places, which I'm sure the majority of you guys have heard of, whether you have read it or not. There is a lot of controversy and mixed opinions on that book. Personally, I do understand why some people do not like it, with the topic of mental health and how this is romanticised, and also the relationships that the kids have with their parents. I'm not a fan of that, but I feel like my overall enjoyment of the book, I did enjoy it. And this book, I feel like I'm trying to decide whether I enjoyed it more or not. I feel like my enjoyment was maybe the same, maybe slightly more. This is basically about two teenagers. One is called Libby Strout, who used to be the biggest teenager in America. She's lost a lot of weight now and she's going back to school, so this follows her first few months going into junior year, I believe. And the second perspective is told by Jack, who has, I can't remember the name because I can't even pronounce it, but he has a disorder or condition where he can't recognise people's faces, which I have never heard about before, and it was really interesting to read more about it. I can't tell you whether the research was done really well or not throughout this because I have known nothing about this condition at all, but it was really interesting seeing as I'd never really heard of it before. And basically this is a two perspective book in case you haven't already guessed, and it's about these two who have stories intertwine, they become friends, and overall it was a very enjoyable book. I love the character, well, I love most of the characters. I love Libby, she's probably my favourite. She is just fearless. She's had so much happen to her throughout her life, especially as she's still dealing with the grief of her mother, who she lost a good few years ago. That's not a spoiler, by the way. And Jack is dealing with his own issues at home as well with his family. And even though they are both going through those issues, it is nice how they can kind of come together and feel really understood by each other and find friendship and comfort within one another, which is really nice. I haven't read reviews by many other people who have read this book. I feel like All the Bright Places actually has a higher rating than Holding Up the Universe, but I feel like I prefer this story maybe slightly more for this one, and just prefer this story slightly more than All the Bright Places. But yeah, overall I did enjoy it. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars, I think, and yeah, it was an enjoyable read and it was really interesting to learn some new things whilst reading it, and yeah, it was cool. Enjoyed it. The next book that I read, or listened to rather, was Over the Top by Jonathan Van Ness. If you don't know who Jonathan Van Ness is, he is one of the boys from the Fab Five from Queer Eye, which is one of my favourite TV shows of all time. I love it so, so much. It is so wonderful, and this is basically Jonathan's autobiography, memoir, whatever you want to call it. I was debating whether or not to pick this book up because there were some signed copies somewhere and I was like, do I get them? But the audiobook was on script and it's narrated by Jonathan, so I thought I would enjoy it a lot more if I listened to the audiobook, because obviously I feel like Jonathan's words would come to life more because he is speaking them to you, and I did really enjoy it. I haven't read many autobiographies or memoirs before. If I have, they're generally equine related, horse riders who have been to the Olympics and stuff. So this is like one of my first ones that's just kind of celebrity, if you want to see what I mean, like somebody who's not part of the horse world. But I did enjoy it. I feel like I wouldn't have enjoyed it as much if I had physically read it. I don't think Jonathan is like an amazing writer, but it was really interesting to hear about his life and the struggles that he's gone through. He went through so much that I didn't know about, that I guess a lot of people don't know about, and it was amazing to see what a wonderful life he has made of himself, for himself, how he is on a wonderful TV show with some people that he absolutely adores. And it was, like I said, it was just really interesting to hear his journey, and also the audiobook just made it better because obviously he was narrating it, so he was putting like that sass and the class. I don't know how much class there actually was in it, but you know what I mean. It brought all the sass and all the everything. It brought everything, which I really enjoyed. So I am really glad that I ended up picking it up on audiobook, and I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars, I think. I don't really have much to compare it to, like I said, and obviously I don't feel like you can always rate a memoir or an autobiography in certain ways because it is somebody's life story, so it feels like kind of wrong to rate somebody's life story. But overall I did really enjoy it. and quite a few of the other Queer Eye guys have Bookshop now, so I intend to slowly make my way through all of them, which would be so much fun. So yeah, absolutely wonderful read. If you plan on picking this book up, I highly recommend you choose the audiobook. It was definitely the right route for me to go. So yeah, really enjoyed it, gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and it was fab. And the last book that I have read recently is The Magnificent Mrs Mayhew by Millie Johnson. This is actually my aunt's book, and she let me borrow it because she read it, really enjoyed it, and thought I would like it. This book is about a girl named Sophie Mayhew who is married to a politician. Basically, Sophie is fed up. She does not enjoy her life. She doesn't enjoy being in the spotlight, how she is like a possession to everybody. She doesn't have a lot of love in her life. Her parents and her siblings have no form of emotional attachment to each other. She feels like she is just known as Sophie the Trophy, as it is said in the book, to her husband's colleagues and also her husband. So one day she runs away and she discovers this little community in the middle of Yorkshire, and she meets all these wonderful people, and that is all you need to know going into it. Okay, so here is the thing. The whole of this book I actually really enjoyed. I was engaged the entire time, and I love Sophie. I think she is amazing. You really, really feel for her. I feel like this book is just full of emotions, and you just see what Sophie is going through, see how other people are treating her, how little love she has in her life and how much respect she does not have, and how miserable she is, which really makes you feel for her. And a lot of the characters I despised when in like the first 100 pages of this book. Like, I do not like her husband or his work colleagues or her family or her family-in-law. Like, they are all despicable. Oh my god. It's also probably because it's part to do with politics, and I know politics is really important, but I find politics really annoying. Like, it makes my skin prickle every time I think about it. So that's probably why I felt so frustrated. But the family that she meets in Yorkshire are so wonderful. They are the absolute opposites. They are absolute gems. There is little Luke, who is a joy, and Elliot, his dad, who is so wonderful, and Tracy, who just seems like the most amazing friend. And I love how when Sophie is in this village, she encounters peace and love for the first time in maybe the second time in her life. She went to a very prestigious school, which changed a lot about her, and it was really lovely that she was able to experience things like love and happiness and being able to just feel free from any attachments or anything, any pressure or anything that her old life had. And I just felt for her so much, and it was amazing to see her come into her own and kind of discover a bit more about her relationship with her husband and also her life back home. And it was just really wonderful read. It was very, very engaging, like I said. Half of the characters I despised. They're supposed to be despisable, I am sure, and then the other half of the characters I absolutely adored, and I was very pleased with the ending. Sophie got what she deserved in the end, and it was just really enjoyable. I don't know how many more Millie Johnson books I'll pick up in the future, but I did really enjoy this, and I'm glad that I got to read it again, as I'm trying to get more into adult books, and I guess like adult contemporary and adult romance are quite nice books to kind of ease myself into it. So yeah, I did really enjoy this book. If you are looking for a adult contemporary romance, or kind of like an adult one of like finding yourself sort of thing, I would recommend this book. It is really wonderful, even though some of the characters are an absolute pain in the butt. But I really, really enjoyed this book, so I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. So that is it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Hopefully I didn't ramble too much. I have no idea whether I'm going to be doing another one of these at the end of by the end of the year. Probably I'll do Probably not, because Christmas is going to be a busy ass time. I've got so much to do, but it's all fun, so it's fine, yay. But luckily I had a really amazing time reading the majority of these books. I thought they were so much fun, and some books that I have had on my TBR for ages, which I'm so glad that I finally read. Let me know in the comments some books that you guys have read recently, if you have read any of these books and your thoughts on them, because I would love to know as always. If you like this video, then please make sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more bookish videos from me, then make sure you hit that subscribe button and little bell icon so you'll be noted every time I post a new video. As always, I will leave links to my social media along with links to my Goodreads in the description down below for you guys. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you again very soon. Bye!